So we're going to look at non-financial variances. So we've got this potato chip company, and they produce gourmet chips distributed to a whole bunch of shops. We don't care about that. To ensure that their chips are of the highest quality and have taste appeal, Kathy has a rigorous inspection process. So for quality control purposes, Kathy has a standard based on the number of kilograms of chips inspected per hour. So kilograms of chips inspected per hour. So she wants to meet this standard. So we already know that this is some variance that we can calculate. And also the number of kilograms that pass or fail inspection. So number of kilograms that pass or fail inspection. So she wants to meet this standard too. Because of course, the higher the number of chips that fail, the more expensive it's going to be. So Kathy expects that for every 1,000 kilograms of chips produced, 200 kilograms of chips will be inspected. When we look at this, this is 200 divided by 1,000. So she wants a rate 20%. So she wants 20% of all chips produced to be inspected. All right. Inspection of 200 kilograms of chips should take 1 hour. Okay. So now we know this 20% inspection should take 1 hour. So 200 chips should take 1 hour of time. I'm going to say 1 hour of time. And if it takes longer, then you're wasting money. If it takes shorter, you're saving money, right? Now, Kathy also expects 1% of chips inspected to fail inspection. So she wants 1% to fail inspection. No more. If more fail inspection, that means they're throwing away those chips. It's not like you can rework them or anything like that. You're going to have to throw them away. During the month of May, so now we know in May, they produced 113,000 kilograms of chips. So they inspected 22,300 kilograms of chips. And the inspections took, the inspections took 120 hours. We can see that the failure rate was 215 kilograms of chips. All right. Now, compute two variances that help determine whether the time spent on inspections, so the time spent on inspections, so our variance is time spent on inspections, are more or less than expected. And they say follow a format similar to the one used for the variable overhead spending and efficiency variances, but without the prices. So in this case, although I usually use the diamond approach for the variances or variable variances, I really can't use the diamond approach. It's not going to work. I don't have an application rate or anything like that, but I can use a similar thought process. So I can say to myself, I want to know how much time is spent on inspections, how much time should have been spent on inspections. Now, let's just think about this. I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to think about this. I can look at my production in kilograms, okay? So I can multiply this by the percentage of kilograms that should be inspected, okay? Then I can multiply this by the hours or portion of hours for each inspection. Okay, and that will give me the time spent on inspections. So for instance, if there is 113,000 kilograms, the percentage that should be inspected is 20%. And then how long should this take? Well, don't forget, I've got 1 hour and I should be able to do 200 kilograms within that 1 hour. So it should take me 0.005 of an hour. This is the percentage that should be inspected. And that's the standard, right? By the way, this of 1 hour, that's the standard too. And this is actual production. If I multiply these all out, it should tell me how long I should have spent on inspections if I was following my standards. So I should have spent 113 hours on inspections. That's what I should have spent. Now, how long did I actually spend? I spent 120 hours, right? And keep in mind what this is. This is, I'm going to move this up for a second. This is actual production in kilograms multiplied by the actual percentage of kilograms that was inspected, because we're doing actual, and multiply that by the actual hours or portion of hours for each inspection. Right? So keep in mind, when I said this was the time spent on inspections, it wasn't. It was the standard time that should have been spent on inspection. There we go. Now, I could probably figure this out because it's still 113,000 actual production. I need to multiply it by the percentage that they actually inspected. Well, I know what that percentage is because I know they inspected 22,300. So 22,300 divided by the 113 kilograms, that tells me that this is how many. The actual percentage was not 20%, it was only 19% percentage that was inspected. Now I've got to multiply that by the actual portion of the hour that was actually spent on inspection. So I happen to know that they spent 120 hours. I can work back. This is the answer, right? This is the number of hours on inspections. So what I need here is I need the amount of time that they took for every single inspection of every single kilogram. So if I look at this, I can already calculate this number. I can take the 120 and I can divide it by the amount of kilograms that were inspected. There we go. Awesome. So keep in mind what this is. This is the actual hours, right? Hours, portion of an hour that they spent for each inspection. Now, keep in mind, this is the actual amount of time spent on inspections. This is how much time we should have spent on inspections. And notice that this is different and this is different. So I've got to do a midpoint between these two. I'm just going to insert another column and maybe one more. Okay. So now I want to do a midpoint because this has two changing items and this has two changing items. I can't do that. I have to have one changing item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the production in kilograms. I still need to have that. I'm going to multiply that. Now, what do I want to change? I'm looking at here. Here's the actual hours of inspection. Here is the hours of inspection I should have done. I just have to change one variable. Let's keep the actual percentage of kilograms that were inspected. And let's change this to the standard number of hours. Okay. So I'm going to take the 113,000, that's always the same. I don't care where I take it from. I'm going to multiply it by the actual percentage that was inspected, and I'm going to multiply it by the standard amount of time that each inspection should take. I'm going to take this, multiply, that's 111.5 hours at the standard rate per hour. Okay, so now let's compare these. I see 120 minus 111.5 hours. That's 8.5 hours. I see that the only thing that's changed is the actual hours that each inspection took me. So it should have taken me 0.005 for each inspection. It took me 0.005381. That is bad. This is really checking how efficiently I spent my time. So this is an efficiency variance. Now, over here, let's just move it over for a second. Over here, the only thing that changed, because this is the same and this is the same, the only thing that changed was how many inspections did I actually do, right? How many inspections did I actually do? So I take the 113 and I subtract the 111.5, and this is hours. So I spent fewer hours doing inspection. When you look at that, you could say, well, I spent fewer hours doing inspections. And don't forget, what are we testing here? The variance is the time spent on inspections. So I spent fewer hours on inspection. This is favorable, right? And this is basically a quantity variance. I'm just checking how much time I actually spent on inspections. Now, you could say to yourself, but else, we should have done 20% and we didn't. We only did 19%. That's bad. You inspected less. But it's actually a variance where we're checking the time spent on the inspections. We're not checking whether we did the right amount of inspections. We're saying, how long did I spend on inspections? And the fact is, I spent 1.5 hours fewer on inspections than I thought we were going to, based on our level of production. This is positive. It's positive because of what I am actually looking at, time spent on inspection. I spent less time on inspection. That's a favorable variance. Okay, so we've got an efficiency variance saying how efficiently did we use our time? And then we have a quantity variance, which says how much time overall did I spend on all these inspections? Okay. 2, compute 2 variances that can be used to evaluate the percentage of chips that failed the inspection. Okay, so now remember what I'm doing. This variance is how many chips failed inspections. That's what I'm testing right now. We got to be careful to say what we're testing because it could be positive or negative. So we're going to go over here and I need to know some way of doing this. I want to start over here because I always find it a little easier to look at the standard. And what I'm trying to figure out is how many chips should have failed. So remember, we've got the production in kilograms. And I'm going to multiply this by what? The standard kilograms. So this is the percentage of kilograms that should be inspected. Okay, 20% should be inspected. And then I'm going to multiply this by the standard failure rate, which is, we know, 1%. So if I do that, 113,000 kilograms, multiply it by the 20%, then I'm going to multiply that by the 1% failure rate that we're expecting. And so that's telling me 226 kilograms should fail based on the standards. Okay, now I can compare that to how many did fail, right? We know how many failed. They said 215 kilograms that did fail inspection. Now, we can work backwards and figure out what this is. So this is production in kilograms. I want to multiply it. How many did we actually, the percentage of kilograms that we actually inspected? Percentage of kilograms that were actually inspected, right? And then I'm going to multiply this by the actual failure rate. Okay, well, we know this is 113,000 kilograms. We're going to multiply it by the actual inspection rate. Well, I happen to know that we inspected 22,300 kilograms. So 22,300 kilograms, what percentage did we actually test of the 113? We only tested the 19%. We already knew this before. Percentage actually inspected. We calculated this before. It's right up here, okay? Now we have to calculate the actual failure rate. So I'm going to take the amount that's failed and I'm going to divide it by the amount that we actually tested. And that will get me my failure rate. Aha, this is my actual failure rate. All right, so now we know this. What do we need? We need this center portion. How are we going to calculate the center portion? Well, obviously, we're going to take the actual production because that's what we always do. Now I'm going to change one thing. I've got the actual failure rate, standard failure rate. I've got the percentage kilogram that were actually inspected, the percentage that should have been inspected. I'm going to keep this percentage that should have been expected, and I'm going to multiply it by the standard failure rate. So 113 kilograms. I'm going to multiply it by the actual percentage inspected. And I'm going to multiply it by the standard failure rate. And when I do that, I get 223. This is the expected failures, right? At the actual percentage inspected. Okay, now let's take the difference. 8 kilograms. So we should have had 223 failures, but we only had 215. So this is favorable. Now, what are we actually testing here? We are looking at the failure rate. We expected the failure rate to be 1%, and it wasn't 1%, it was lower. So this is a test of quality. This is a quality variance. Remember, our quality was better because we had a lower failure rate. That means we had a higher pass rate. It is speaking to the quality of our chips. Now, let's go over here. We see the difference, 226 minus 223, okay? And don't forget, this is kilograms. All right, is this good or bad? We're going to look at what the difference is. The only difference is this. And remember, how many chips failed inspections? That's what we're looking at. And we see that we thought 226 kilograms were going to fail inspection, and only 223 did. So this is favorable. And why is it favorable? Because this is a quantity variance. We're just checking the quantity that failed. Only 223 failed, but 226 should have failed based on the standard. And so we know less failed, and this is a positive thing. So this is a quantity variance. So keep in mind, this was a more challenging question than you usually see, but it's because we're using non-financial variances, which we can. We just have to think about what these non-financial variances are testing before we decide whether they are favorable or unfavorable.